Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I'm Ken Coughlin.
And I'm Ben Lander.
And we are thrilled that you're joining us here this lovely Wednesday evening. I don't know if it's lovely. My office, our studio here is in a dungeon, and I have no windows, and I haven't been outside for quite some time. So it could be a tornado.
Yeah.
It's hot outside. There's not like tornadoes, though, going by.
Not that I'm aware of.
Don't you forget
I'm at the same
this
place as you.
What's that?
I said, you forget this afternoon when it was hotter than the hottest side of the sun.
I was outside, yes, earlier this afternoon. It was very, very hot. It's hot in my office, which is why I'm not wearing an outer shirt. And as the pun was said beforehand, I won't look as cool as Ben does tonight with his double-layered action going on there, but I will be physically cooler. It gets especially as it gets hotter and hotter as the show goes on. We have to turn off all the fans and everything in here for sound reasons. Anyway, hey, thank you very much for joining the show this evening. If you've never been with us before, the byline down there at the bottom of the screen says it all. We are water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective, which means we try to talk about whatever people out there in the world are talking about. And of course, some of the topics you're going to hear tonight might be new to you. A lot of them might be things that you're hearing about pretty much everywhere. But what makes this program stand out, at least we hope so, is that we try to put Christ first. So we're talking about these topics from the perspective of, hey, how do we discuss these things if Jesus Christ really is our Lord and Savior and really is that preeminent standard that we look to? So that's what we do here. Also, I want to give a quick shout out, by the way, to B.A. Thomas. B.A. Thomas is our new associate media director here. And B.A. fixed a problem that with our broadcast, which I'm wondering if anybody can tell what it is. Before I even go into the next topic, if you look at the screen, you might be able to tell what it is. Something that I've been wanting to address for some time, and I just haven't had the time to figure out what the problem was. B.A. went in and figured it out. Can you look at our screen and tell what it is?
Are you asking Ben and I?
Sure. Well, nobody else. I mean, everybody else on a 30-second delay, so.
Because I already know what it is.
You already know what it is? Well, I'll give you a hint, Ben.
Okay.
If someone online does figure it out and comments about it,
Okay.
you will know exactly what the change was that he made.
It has to do with our blue box.
It has to do with our blue box. You'll notice the words are bigger in the blue box, and actually, you might actually be able to read them for once.
Yeah, I couldn't tell because I still need new contacts.
It's also right here.
That's still small to me.
All right. Well, anyway, speaking of that blue box, let's tell you what that is a little bit. And that is where you are invited to be part of the program. This is a discussion program, but it's not just a discussion between those of us here in the room. It's also a discussion including you. So if we say something that inspires some thought in you, you have a comment, you have a question, you agree with us, you disagree with us, whatever it is, go ahead and comment. If you're watching us on YouTube, you just put your comment there in the live chat on YouTube. We are also on the Trinity Joppa Facebook page. If you're watching us on Facebook, you can just put your comment in the comment section on Facebook. No matter where you put your comment, it should magically appear over there. If it doesn't, it's BA's fault. He messed it up. No, I'm sorry, BA. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm very grateful for what he did. It is kind of a test run because one thing we don't know, it looks like it should scroll. Like if it goes too far, it looks like what we're seeing that the text will scroll over down to the next line at the right place. We'll find out. So somebody leave us a long comment and then we'll know. So anyway, please be part of the program here. Talk to us, ask us questions, comments, because the best shows are always the ones that are the most interactive. I will also ask people, I don't always ask this, but I'm going to throw this one in here at the top and ask you to like this video because, you know, the way YouTube algorithms work, it's more likely to be shared with and seen by other people, the more people that like it. So please click that like button. You can click it as many times as you want as long as it's an odd number. That's the catch. Get it? Because you'll turn it off and on. Yeah.
Like a computer. 010101.
010101. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel. Right now, as of about 30 minutes, I think, before we went on the air, I checked, and we were at 1,199 subscribers. I'm OCD. That bugs me, all right? Please, someone subscribe to the YouTube channel. I know if you go on...
Nobody else unsubscribe.
Nobody else unsubscribe, right? And you won't see it because once you get to a certain level, YouTube rounds. So, like, if you weren't logging as an admin, you just went to our channel, it will say 1.2 thousand subscribers. I am telling you, between us in this room and you out there in the internet land, YouTube is lying to you. It's 1,199 right now. So we need one more subscriber to soothe my OCD anxiety.
And this is the kind of inside information you wouldn't get
you,
otherwise.
You don't get this kind of hard-hitting news unless you're watching our program. I do want to make one other announcement that we have kind of been holding back. We haven't announced this yet, and I don't have a specific date for when this is going to happen, but the people out there in the internet lands don't know that this show is moving. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Locationally, yeah.
Location.
Yes.
We're moving location. Yes. But I think it's safe to announce that now because at this point it better happen. Construction's already well
Plans
underway.
Yeah, in effect.
But yeah, here at Trinity, we are actually in the process of constructing a broadcast and recording studio. Right now, this is kind of a makeshift studio. My office doubles as the studio where we put up the curtains and all this. These curtains all go away when it's the work day. But we are going to be, once that is done, and it may still be a few months down the road. I don't want to get people's hopes up here because even once they build, the walls and like the electric is pretty much done. I was just up there looking at it. But once that all gets done, we still need to go in and we need to build the set and get the set pieces and the lighting and the cameras.
It's going to be a little while.
It's going to be a while before all that gets done. But we're really excited about it. I was just up there. It looks really cool. And it's going to give us an opportunity. It's obviously not just for this program. I mean, we're using it to share the gospel in many different ways. We're going to be using it at our school here is going to be using it. We're going to have a video production class here taught at our school. And it's going to be one more way that we're, look, let's be honest. God's blessed us here at Trinity.
Yeah.
I can't. I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, we have, at the time it was 1,197. Now it's 1,199 subscribers. If I didn't mention that, please subscribe, get us to that 1,200.
Maybe by the end of the
Maybe by the end of the show. That'd be great. But while, in the grand scheme of YouTube channels, 1,200 subscribers, I'm optimistic. I'm already saying 1,200.
Yeah.
1,200 subscribers is peanuts. It's nothing, But for churches, that's a lot. That's a big. And so I am humbled that there's that many people that are interested in what we're doing here online. And so we're trying to honor that and use this platform that we've been given to share the gospel and spread the gospel into corners of the online world where people are gathering, where the gospel needs to go.
Yeah.
It needs to go.
Yeah.
So, all right. That's enough of an intro. Let's get on. We've only got 3 stories tonight because Mary Kay and I need to go grocery shopping. So we're hoping the show will be shorter. And I'm already behind the 8 ball on that
No
with this long
guarantees.
introduction. So let's get going on our first topic tonight. Ben, what is our first topic?
Well, speaking of things that you probably
I thought you were going to say, speaking of grocery shopping.
No, I mean, that has no relation
Hey,
here.
what? I'm sorry. Before you go on to the first topic, last week's comment.
There were no lot of topics. The only comment on last week's show was Ben's comment saying, we lost the stream. If you weren't watching last week, there actually are 2 videos of last week's show because we were in the middle of a big thunder and lightning storm. We lost the stream in the middle of the show, or towards the end actually, and we did restart a new one, but it's a different link. So if you're trying to watch last week's show, there's actually 2 links for that. But if you watch the first one, there's a link that'll pop up on there so you can go right to the second one from it. So
Yeah.
all right. Anyway, first topic. Cool.
So this is a topic that I'm sure you've heard about. Actually, if you watched our show last week, then you are familiar with the goings-on in Afghanistan. Now, tonight's take on it is sort of an update, sort of things that have progressed since even last week. There is a really self-imposed, actually, the U.S. has put a timeline for our withdrawal from Afghanistan to August 31st. That's not a lot of time as of this broadcast. That is a little over a week, a little under a week. That's next Tuesday, isn't it? So in 6 days. So that is been met with mixed review, we'll say, both domestically and foreign. And one of those kind of voices out there, not surprisingly, is the Taliban itself. The Taliban has issued a statement. A spokesperson from the Taliban has said that the U.S. specifically will be met with severe measures if we do not hold to that August 31st deadline. So they are issuing that ultimatum to us. Now, Biden has issued a statement that he plans to keep to that time frame and pull out all of our troops. Now, for that to actually happen, that means that we have to end the current evacuations as they are happening now by Friday, and we have to start pulling our troops out themselves by Friday because there's going to be a number of days that will be consumed by just taking our troops out of there. However, the Biden administration seems to be optimistic that we can hold to that deadline and we can evacuate all of the American citizens there. However, as I said before, a lot of the competing voices around this issue, there's no shortage of them, and some actually bipartisan. There are Republicans and Democrats who are criticizing this, and we talked about that a little bit last week as well, but particularly with the 31st deadline, that it's all well and good, even if we can, by some estimates, even if we can remove all of our troops and U.S. citizens and passport and emergency visa holders by Tuesday, there are still going to be a number of Afghan allies and interpreters and so many more Afghan citizens who wish to be evacuated who will not be. It's just not physically possible to evacuate everybody that desires to evacuate by Tuesday. So as that unfolds, we'll see what happens with that. Now, also in the midst of all of this, I know there were 2 senators who made a trip over to Kabul to meet with, I guess not necessarily, but there was the CIA director, former CIA director, who went and purportedly met with the Taliban director, although very few details have come out about what happened with that meeting. And then there were 2 senators, actually one Republican and one Democrat, who went this past week amid all of the evacuations. And Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, had to issue a statement saying that unauthorized travel to Kabul would detract from the evacuation efforts. But those 2 senators who went there came back and are 2 of the voices that are critical of the evacuation plan right now, stating even, quote, that Washington should be ashamed. They were very proud of the ground forces in Afghanistan, but that Washington should be ashamed of the position that they've put those ground forces in. So that's kind of the long and short of it as it unfolds right now. What do you make of all of this?
Well, you said it all. Next story. No,
Okay.
I mean, you know what? I said in the show a lot of times before that I don't trust the media. You know what else I don't trust? The government. So, I mean, maybe I'm just too untrustworthy.
Partnership.
You know who I do trust? I trust God. And by the way, if we get a little funky and see us swatting, there's a fly flying around here. I don't know if anybody else has seen it. So if at some point, you see me go like that and actually hit Ben in the head, there it goes. There he is. Sorry, I don't know if you can see him on camera or not. Probably not, because we got a black background. It'd be hard for them to see. But if you see us looking around aimlessly, we're not like tripping on something. It's just there's a fly and it's getting very distracting because it's whoa. There it is.
Lands on.
Anyway, here's my first takeaway from some of these articles I was reading, and this is actually an article. I'm trying to say the same article. I'm trying to remember which one this was from. I don't have the actual top part here to see. It didn't print out to say who this actually is, but this was they were doing live updates. It was from ABC News, I think, but there was a live updates of the situation in Kabul, and they actually posted 2 updates, and according to their timestamps, they were posted at the same time. All right, August 25th at 7:18 a.m. They posted both of these live updates. All right, the first one says the U.S. has evacuated approximately 37,000 people since the effort began on August 14th. Mm-hmm. The second one says the United States has evacuated and facilitated the evacuation of some 82,300 people from Kabul since August 14th.
That's a big discrepancy.
That's a huge discrepancy. And so
Wait, read it again.
37,000 versus 82,300.
No. Read exactly.
Yes, it says the United States has evacuated and facilitated the evacuation. I get it. I'm getting there. Of some 82,300 people from Kabul since August 14th. So one says evacuated, one says evacuated and facilitated the evacuation of.
Read the first one again.
The U.S. has evacuated approximately 37,000 people since the effort began on August 14th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I thought you said Americans.
No, it did not say Americans. It said people. And so it's like, okay, what do you mean by facilitated? Is it really something different from evacuation? Because if so, I think you're really stretching your numbers because that's a huge difference to kind of make it look like I think the evacuation is going better than it is.
Yeah, and giving even the benefit of the doubt does it say specifically from Kabul?
The second one does. I mean, that's the only place they're evacuating from.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
they're not evacuating
and
from
it's not
any
like
place
there's
other
more
than
than one airport.
No,
that they're
they got one
evacuating from.
airport.
There's only one airport there in Kabul that they're being funneled through and evacuating from. I don't know how they justify that discrepancy.
Well, it just shows that information, you can't always trust the information that you're being told. All right, you can't, and it's frustrating to me because, as Christians, obviously I think that we have an obligation to try to help people. I mean, obviously you're looking at the people that were, serving as interpreters and helping us. And also there's people, let's face it, especially the Taliban does not have a good history with women, that want to get out. There's video of mothers handing their babies over the wall to try to get them to American soldiers to evacuate them. That just, I mean, as a Christian, we want to try to see, we obviously want to try to support efforts to get people out that want to get out. But it's hard to know how to feel sometimes when we can't get straight information. B.A. Thomas says 82,300 people versus 37,000 people. Is it just a matter of units? Did they mean troops? Maybe, but if so, that's poor reporting, because reporting doesn't say that. It says people. And getting back to what Ben said before, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because there weren't that many troops in there to begin with. There were, I believe, initial reports were between 2,500 to 3,500 troops were in Afghanistan before President Biden ordered the withdrawal. And now there's actually the latest report here says 6,000 troops in Afghanistan to facilitate the evacuation. But I don't see how you can use those numbers in any way, shape, or form to add up to any of these figures or the differences that they're talking about here, obviously. And BA, if you weren't watching from the top, I gave you a shout out. So anybody else who's watching, that BA who commented is the same one who's responsible for you being able to read your comments in the box over there.
He also tested out his own work. So
yeah, he did. And he gave us a long enough one so we know that it scrolls over to say we're talking about onto the next line. So yay. All right. So that was my first takeaway. Is just, I think it just illustrates that how can we trust anything we're being told one way or the other when we're getting such drastically conflicting information. The other thing takeaway that I had from this, it gets back to what you were talking about, those two. I think it was actually members of the House, two representatives that went down there.
Yeah.
And it was, and did you mention? I think you mentioned that it was one Republican and one Democrat. So this is not partisan at all. Now they've been criticized because they were the criticism is, well, if you're going there and you're taking up spots in the plane, for example, and you're inhibiting the ability to get as many people out as possible, they responded, hey, look, we only sat in the crew seats that were designated for crew, and frankly, even the plane that we traveled on wasn't even completely full to begin with. So we did not take up any extra seats according to what they're telling us. Of course, go back to what I just said before about whether you can trust anything we're being told right now. Right. But according to what they said, they didn't prevent anybody. No, it was prevented from getting out as a result of them. Which also begs the question, why are the planes still leaving without being full?
Compared to that one that we saw, the what model was it? But the huge airplane.
I'm sorry, BA says it's almost like I conveniently planned to test the wraparound.
There you go.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, compare that. Flights are still leaving with empty seats versus the one pilot who had that packed full with standing room only. There's photos of that. So,
but we're being told it's going so much more efficiently now that we're confident. One breath is we're confident we can get this done because things are going so much more efficiently. But then we're also hearing stories of planes leaving even recently, because when these two representatives left, they're saying their plane wasn't full. Well, how are you going to get? And you're right. They said that they were told by the boots on the ground there that it just can't happen.
Yeah.
That even if Biden were to extend the deadline to September 11th,
still couldn't happen.
It still couldn't happen.
There was one estimate that I saw that if you were to evacuate not only just the troops and the U.S. citizens and the visa holders and the emergency visa applicants and the translators and all those who wish to evacuate, they said at the current rate probably couldn't get all of them out until 2023. So I mean that tells you right there, like, and I don't think that's an overestimate necessarily if you are considering all of those who wish to flee.
Which means we're going to have, I think, a humanitarian crisis on our hands. I mean,
we're already starting to see
we're starting to see that, and I just don't see how. I mean, maybe I'll be surprised, and if I am, I'll be the first to admit it. But I think this was a botched job. I'm sorry. I think there was not enough forethought into the planning for the withdrawal, regardless of how you feel about whether we should have been in Afghanistan or shouldn't have been in Afghanistan. And I'll put my cards on the table. I think we should have kept some level of forces in Afghanistan, but I get the frustration of people that it's been going on for so long that didn't want them there. But regardless of how you feel about that, this clearly shows we did not have. I'm sorry, I don't believe the president technically I think what I heard wasn't the president. It was, I don't know, it was the press secretary. I can't remember who it was that said this, who tried to claim that, we had plans for every eventuality and this was one of them. Yeah. I don't believe you. If this was your plan, then you had a pretty bad plan,
Frankly, yeah.
I mean, you're planning to get in a situation where you're going to strand thousands upon thousands of people there. Mm-hmm. And I think now here's my bigger concern as a Christian now, speaking as a Christian, is, like I said, I think we're about to see a humanitarian crisis. And we do have examples of people, Christian ministries going into hostile environments that are opposed to Christianity, let's face it, like China, an example, and doing ministries like that, and to help spread the gospel in those areas. I think, to be honest, I think that we talked about this thing last week, that Afghanistan, even before the Taliban moved in, was one of the most
second highest,
most dangerous place to be a Christian in the world. It's even more so now, I would say. Yeah. I'm worried about the fact that we're going to have people that are going to be in need. And I just don't have the confidence that the Taliban's going to tolerate. I mean, even leaving aside spreading the gospel, which I think is obviously our top priority, just talking about basic humanitarian needs, food, shelter, clothing, that we want to try to help out. Like one of these articles mentioned, for example, the World Bank. What?
It's a big fly.
It's a big fly. I told you it's a big fly. It's going everywhere. Oh, it's on the screen?
Yeah, I can't hit it because I'll break the
screen. Don't break the screen. So that would be bad. But yeah, the World Bank has frozen aid to Afghanistan since the Taliban took over. And that saddens me. I understand. How do you have any guarantee if you're sending aid to that country that it's not going to be used for terrorist ends, right, which they've clearly shown a history of supporting? How do you know it's going to go to where it needs to go? And so that, I think, is the next challenge for us as Christians, is figuring out how do we help those people who need help, frankly, getting around the regime that is not going to want to accept our help.
Yeah, and just like you say, the evidence, not only do we in America have little faith in the Taliban for keeping their word, those in Afghanistan have little faith. It's evidenced with the photos and videos you see of mothers handing over their children to U.S. troops to try to get them out. I saw one video this past week, without going too graphic. It wasn't, all it was a man who had his face obscured and he was speaking to the camera, but it was a Christian man in Afghanistan who was left behind, so to speak. And he was...
Don't use those words, man. Come on, seriously.
Well, those are his words. They're his words. He said...
now we have to pay royalties to Tim LaHaye.
No, but that's, I guess, the sentiment, at least of certain, I would imagine a lot of Christians.
I feel that way.
Because they've said, he's speaking to the camera and he's saying that he's basically, it's his verbal will and testament. He's saying it's like a spoken epitaph almost. He said, whatever happens, he said, we feel, and he's getting emotional. He says that we feel left behind by the world. The world has forgotten us. We've been left in the field, I guess were his actual words. And he said, but we will not leave the field. We will do God's work here still. He said, my only request is if there are none of us left, if there happen to be any children or women, please watch after them. So there's that cry right there, which is all we need to hear, that there is a need. And so what do? I mean, the primary thing we do is pray, and pray earnestly and fervently, believing that, God raises up nations and he tears them down.
And I think God is going to call some people to take that risk. I mean, I don't know who that's going to be. And that's why we need to explore God's calling, I think. But I think that they're just like there are missionaries that go into China, we knew a gentleman, and I can't remember if it was Pakistan or Afghanistan. And I apologize, I'm blanking on his name. He was actually on this show before we changed formats. And he was a missionary that took a number of missionary trips into one of these countries. He was trying to develop a Christian school there. And I got to admit, when I heard about the Taliban takeover, he was one of the first ones I thought of. About what this means. Robert Batista. No, wait. Robert Batista works here.
Yeah.
It wasn't Robert, but wasn't his last name Batista too? I don't know. Maybe it was Robert Batista. It was just a heck of a coincidence, but not the same Robert Batista who works here at Trinity.
I don't know. I have to look it up.
Yeah.
I couldn't find the episode.
Yeah, it was a while ago, but I think of people like that who were doing some really good work and what this means for them, and just how we're logistically going to have to, it's going to be a lot more dangerous than it already was, obviously, to do these things in Afghanistan, but that's what we got to do. Yeah. And also it puts perspective on us here in the U.S. about, as much as we complain, and we do, let's be honest, all right? We as a Christian church, we complain about persecution against the Christian church in the United States. And I'm not trying to belittle any of that. There are things we've talked about on the show before.
There's an anti-Christian sentiment.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
And, I'm Ben and I certainly have never been afraid to call it out. And there's a way to do it and all that. But I think when we see things like this, it should help us still keep some perspective that despite all of that, and despite the fact that, yes, it's okay, I think, to speak out against that, we're still blessed. We are in a very blessed situation. And if you ever lose sight of that, all I'll say is, read the Bible, read the New Testament, and see what kind of circumstances, and read some history about what kind of circumstances they were living under. Because I'll give you one name, 4 letters, Nero. Read about Nero. Do a Google search, okay? And that'll put you in a right mindset to say, yeah, you know what? We have these issues, but we really are blessed. And because we're blessed, I think we have a responsibility to try to help Christians elsewhere. And not just Christians, help anybody who's in need, but particularly to help spread the gospel and to be sympathetic and helpful to our brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
So.
And also we have those who are coming over, the refugees that we'll have now here too. That's an opportunity for them to hear the gospel.
Absolutely.
Wherever God has planted you.
So if you're a refugee and you're watching this, we have worship services at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. No, I'm sorry. We have food closet. Which might be, more people need. So anyway, all right. I've got a feeling we're going to be talking about Afghanistan repeatedly on the show for quite a few weeks here. We'll see.
It's ongoing.
Oh, okay. We'll get to that. Remind me. Don't let me forget. It's a teaser. We're going to get to it before the end of the show, which she's put here, but we'll maybe close the show with that. So let's move on to story number 2, shall we?
Sure thing.
All right. So story number 2, again, you've probably heard about, unless you've been living under a rock, and that is just yesterday, I believe, wasn't it? That yesterday?
Was it yesterday or the day before?
It was either Monday or Tuesday this week. Well, let's see. What's the date today? It was Monday, because this is dated August 23rd, and it says today. Yeah. So on Monday, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the first COVID-19 vaccine for full approval. All right. And that was the Pfizer vaccine. And specifically, it's the Pfizer vaccine being approved for use in people who are 16 and older. You may be aware that obviously right now the Pfizer vaccine is available for everybody who's 12 and older, but this full authorization is only for those 16 and older, which was what it was originally being used for before they expanded what's called the emergency use authorization down to the age 12. And so they're still, Pfizer is still looking for and pursuing the full authorization for ages 12 and up, but that hasn't come through yet. What does this mean? Well, from a legal perspective, what it means is there's a process that the FDA goes in improving, any drugs, and especially vaccines, all right? And there's certain testing that's required and data that has to be reported. Now, in certain circumstances, because if there is a state of emergency or a public health crisis, then the FDA can approve a vaccine or a drug under what's called emergency use authorization. And what that means is say, hey, look, we might not have, we only have like short-term results. Usually it's about 2 months. We have like 2 months worth of data. And we understand that based upon that, there may be some risks, there may be some benefits. We think right now, given the current state of emergency, the potential benefits outweigh the potential risks. And so we're going to authorize this medication or vaccine to be used on an emergency basis right now. That's been the status of all the COVID vaccines available here in the United States since their inception, since they became available. Then, after you go through the additional testing and reporting requirements, which is usually at least 6 months of data reporting, then you can get full authorization, all right, which basically means this isn't just an emergency use authorization anymore. You are now approved just like any other drug is approved. Now, The full approval, all right, does not mean that there's not still testing going on and results being reported. As a matter of fact, they usually follow their test subjects for up to 2 years after that, but they don't wait the full 2 years to grant a vaccine or a drug full approval. After 6 months or so, that's usually good enough to do that. So that's what's happened now with the Pfizer vaccine, because it was actually the first one to apply for it, and Moderna's probably coming next because they applied just a few weeks after Pfizer did. And then Johnson & Johnson actually hasn't applied for full authorization yet. They're saying they're hoping to by the end of the year. My wife's going to say something.
I'm not sure that's completely correct, because I think I heard this morning that they were trying to apply.
They're trying to apply. That's what they said. At least what I read in one of these stories is that their statement was, we're trying to apply before the end of the year, is what they said. Johnson & Johnson. Now, of course, having seen Pfizer get approval, just the way a capitalistic economy works, that may try to push them because they're going to want to keep up with the competition.
Well, yeah, and what people need to understand is when you don't have this emergency authorization, the development of a vaccine usually takes 5 to 10 years. And it's because you can't get the amount of data to have anything statistically significant to report until that time period. With the number of people who've been getting these vaccines, the companies have been able to get to that statistically significant sample size a lot faster.
Well, and to be fair, they're still doing testing as well. I mean, in other words, it's a dual thing where they have their testing and test subjects they do, and then of course they also gather data from people who have had the vaccines, worldwide and everything like that. Now, that's kind of just a legal process that it is. Now, of course, like anything, it's become political, and so there's arguments on both sides as far as what does this mean? Does this mean that, you're going to start seeing more employers start to mandate that their employees be vaccinated? The president has actually explicitly called for that, asked for employers to do that. I kind of spilled my beans on this last week because I said last week's show how I felt about vaccines and vaccine mandates. So I'm going to let you go first on this one, Ben. I mean, not specifically that, whatever your thoughts are, but what are the implications? Where do you see this going?
If I'm remembering your comments last week, I think we were in agreement. If not, correct me because I'll spill my beans. I'm not against vaccines. I'm vaccinated for everything but COVID right now because of a lot of the concerns that are out there. But so I think vaccines are effective and useful, and look at polio, look at chickenpox, all of the above. That's they're useful. I mean, you can't deny the efficacy of vaccination. That being said, I'm also for the right for people to choose to do that, and so I'm hesitant about mandating anything that's mandated. Required now with the president outright calling for businesses to mandate. If you consider the government a employer, they have
they have a lot of government agencies have been doing, including the U.S. military.
Yeah, so I do think we're going to see that. That's just a natural process.
As a question to both of you, because I believe Ken does agree with you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to certain employers? Are there any employers that you think should have the right to do it because of the nature of the job versus, maybe not, somebody's running a printing shop or somebody who's doing an accounting firm? Are there any jobs that you think that person to be responsible to the people that they serve or that they're around, that maybe a mandate should be allowed?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about,
because
the obvious one is
our children have to have vaccines, or they have to have a form to explain why they're opting out in order to go to public schools. So that's sort of what I'm kind of getting at.
Right, yeah, and the obvious, there are either healthcare workers or teachers or those who are working with the vulnerable, hospice workers, nursing home. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand the need for that, for the herd immunity. I've said before, actually, I've tipped my hand before too on this show about one large group that frequently gets overlooked is those who have had COVID and, the natural immunity. That's the whole dichotomy there. Like, how long does natural immunity last versus vaccinated immunity?
Right.
And actually, there's one article that I came across here in the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, that was actually, the prevailing thought when Pfizer announced its FDA approval was, finally, this is good news. Which I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just looking at both sides. So we, just like you said in our previous story, you have to be careful with all of the misinformation out there, and it's so difficult. Not only with everything is so politicized. It's so difficult to really get down to the actual facts of the matter. And so we just have to be careful. But I think it does us well to be cautious, use an abundance of caution, which is exactly the philosophy of the FDA approval process in the first place. You use an abundance of caution because the alternative is worse. It takes so long because rushing a vaccine could lead to catastrophic unintended consequences. But this article that I found in the BMJ kind of, I don't want to say pokes holes in that FDA approval, but just points out some of the concerns. When we hear that a vaccine has been fully approved by the FDA, then people tend to equate that or assume that, well, this means like I'm good. I'm never going to get COVID. It's going to be 100% effective. Actually, the efficacy that the FDA said was 95% efficacy, I believe, for the Pfizer vaccine. But one of the points that this article in the British Medical Journal raises, it calls it the elephant named waning immunity. It says, since last year, we've heard the Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines are 95% effective with even greater efficacy against severe disease. Whatever one thinks about that 95% efficacy, even the most enthusiastic commentators have acknowledged that measuring vaccine efficacy 2 months after dosing says little about just how long vaccine-induced immunity will last. So that's even, it's a common understanding with something like the flu shot. You've got waning immunity, with a virus such as influenza and COVID, which is showing signs of being able to mutate. That's why we've got the Delta variant. And I believe the information that Pfizer released didn't even necessarily take into account the Delta variant.
It couldn't have. I mean, because I think their application was submitted in May, and Delta variant really wasn't that common back then.
So that was a concern that the British Medical Journal pointed out, was that the Delta variant wasn't even factored into this. And so it really talks a lot about waning immunity and, how, so say somebody gets vaccinated and it's 95% effective for 2 months. And then as time goes on, it becomes less effective. So by the time, how effective is it really by the time that they are exposed to COVID? So one of the examples that it lists here is in Israel. So recent reports from Israel's Ministry of Health caught my eye. Says they reported that efficacy against infection and symptomatic disease fell to 64%. And then by late July had fallen to 39%, where Delta was a dominant strain. So among Delta variants was 39% actually in Israel. So maybe that's incidental. I don't know. And for context, the FDA's expectation to grant full approval is that it has to be at least 50% effective. So if the true efficacy is 39% after an extended period of time, that's why they're talking about boosters and needing to get those. So that's, I guess to kind of summarize my understanding of it is that, okay, so say we mandate the vaccine, number one, are all boosters going to be mandated then? Because if there's this waning immunity, if the virus mutates, so people have to get a booster shot. I mean, we've never mandated something like the flu shot. So I guess that's just where my take on it is that I'm not against vaccination. Actually, I'm for vaccination, but it becomes hairy when you begin to mandate it for just blanket mandate. Doesn't take into consideration T-cell memory and long-term immunity for those who have recovered from the virus or those who are immunocompromised. So all kinds of different variables, which, I've said before on the show, I think we would do well to have a more robust discussion about.
All right.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I think this is one of those touchy subjects that we may find that we agree on some things and disagree on other things, but we need to have that. I agree with you on that last part. I think we need to have a robust discussion about it. I will start out by saying this, due to some recent policies. I don't even know if they've been announced yet, but I am staff counsel here for both the church and the school, and so I'm kind of behind helping some of these policies. Tim Foster says, "Hi Ben, please explain graphene oxide."
I'm sorry, Tim, you'll have to help me out on graphene oxide.
But I am not going to reveal here on air my vaccination status for COVID, and the reason for that is because because I am an employee of the school, and we have let's put it this way. Let's say that you want to know. We have HIPAA. We have to comply with HIPAA regulations, which means we can't disclose personal medical information about any of our employees to the general public. You've got to protect that. Any information you come into contact with, you have to protect that. And let's say that we had, somebody go around to all our teachers and ask, "Are you vaccinated? Are you vaccinated? Are you vaccinated?" And the answers they get are yes, yes, I don't want to answer. Yes, I don't want to answer. Yes, I don't want to answer. What are they going to conclude?
People who refuse to answer, really, more than likely are not.
And so that's where we're not. I mean, I hope people can understand that. But on the school side of things, we really don't want to. We're not disclosing our vaccination status at all, because it could end up being a workaround into a HIPAA violation. And so that's why I'm not disclosing my vaccination status. I will. Some of the people actually probably already know it. But if you do, please don't put it in the live chat. Yeah. Now, as far as my approach to this whole issue of vaccination to vaccinate or not to vaccinate, to mandate or not to mandate, look, here's my framework for starters, and I think we'll agree on this one. The framework is love, all right? The framework is love for your neighbor. That has to be the framework. We're Christians, all right? And so we should, before we engage in any conversation, we may end up disagreeing about it, but at a minimum, we have to agree that my starting point is not what the Republican Party says. My starting point is not what the Democratic Party says. My starting point is not what I personally kind of prefer, or what might make my life easier or my life harder. My starting point has to be Jesus. And if my starting point is Jesus, that means it has to include love for my neighbor. All right. And so when I started that, how do I reason this out? All right. First of all, I do believe that I am in favor of encouraging as many as people as possible to get the vaccine. And we may disagree about that, but that's my standpoint is kind of like Mary Kay hinted at before. I do think that there's been enough research out there. Yes, there are risks. There absolutely are risks. And I think we're not, especially for young, in that 12 to 15 age group, especially 12 to 15-year-old boys, I believe, there have been some risks of some heart issues and inflammation that have been coming out. Even with that, you look, in my mind, you compare the statistical benefits versus the statistical risk categories, and I do think I encourage people. I think we're better off vaccinating as much as possible. I do agree, and I'll say this for Ben, since you already disclosed your vaccine, and you've disclosed this also on the show before. Yeah. All right, you didn't tonight, but you have before, so please shut me up if I overstep my bounds. That part of the reason is, do you want to say it or should I say it?
I mean, you can say it.
You've had COVID.
Yeah.
You've had COVID.
Yeah.
And so there are, there's antibodies and things like that in there. And I agree, there is research that shows that, that immunity may actually be superior even to vaccination immunity. I don't know. I think the ship's still out on that one, but it's out there. And so I get that too. So when we're talking about a perspective of encouraging, yes, there are people out there in the world who either, let's say talk about the class of people who haven't had COVID, right? Who aren't doing this partially for reasons you have. It's like, look, I think I've got some immunity here, but they haven't had COVID and they're also choosing not to get the vaccine. Right. All right. They are at risk. Whether now, if I'm a perspective of someone that is pro-vax, all right, and wants to encourage vaccination, I may look at that person and say, man, you know what? I don't care. And a lot of people say this, I'll take an extreme example. I've seen someone on social media flat out say that people who have not got vaccinated, the hospitals, when they're doing their triage, should emphasize or prioritize people who have been vaccinated over people who have not, because the people who have not have made their choice and essentially let them die, is what this. And no, absolutely not. That's not
violating our premise
of love.
Yeah.
And I mean, and here's an example. It's like if you got somebody who's in there with a drug overdose and about to die, you're going to say to the emergency room, well, they made their choice. No, that's just not the way we do things. You've got a gang fight and somebody gets shot. You're going to say they shouldn't, bring them in right away. No, I mean, and we don't do this in any other context. You treat them. They're in need. All right. So when it comes to encouraging people to get vaccinated, I don't care, what, if somebody's made that choice, there's somebody at risk. I'm not, and if I feel that they're at risk, I want to try to protect them. That's just the fact. Okay. The question changes though. And for me, that love equation changes somewhat when we're getting to mandates. In answer to Mary Kay's question, are there particular jobs where I'm okay with just personally with employers mandating? Yes. Healthcare workers who are working with the people who are, the most at risk, obviously, is the preeminent one.
Right.
At Joe's Body Shop, do I think Joe's Body Shop should be mandating vaccines? No, I don't. And do they have the legal right to, with this full authorization? Yes, they do. And so I'm a big fan of the marketplace of ideas and the free market economy. And so if Joe's Body Shop chooses to do that, I will defend Joe's Body Shop legal right to do that. I just don't personally want Joe's Body Shop to do that because I think love for your neighbor also includes love for the people who have made this choice. If they don't want to get the vaccination, I think it's frankly unloving to them to force them to do so. Right. And basically to put them in a position where here's your choice. You either get it or you lose your job, or you're unemployed. Now, in fairness, not every mandate is phrased that way. In other words, what the president seems to be encouraging almost seems to be, but like some government agencies have basically said, you either get it or you have to come in with a negative test every week. So it's not that you're going to lose your job. You're just going to be extremely inconvenienced,
When actually, I think, and I think the jury's still out on this. Well, the Supreme Court recently, and I wish I remember where it was, but it was a university that was mandating vaccines for students to come on campus.
Right.
And there were a group of students who filed for a religious exemption. They initially denied their religious exemption, but then they ended up approving it. But they had all these hoops that they had to jump through, basically. And the Supreme Court ruled that, that was placing an undue burden because it was like something to the extreme of they had to not only mask and get either weekly or maybe a couple times a week negative test results, had to basically be branded with a scarlet letter revealing that they were
right.
And they had to stay away from. They had to download an app. This was probably the one that got them. They had to download an app that revealed their location to everyone on campus. So they had to stay away from them.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
So that was probably the one that did it. But and what you're talking about is true. That is placing an undue burden on them, and that's the opposite of love too. Love has to make room for the person's personal choice too.
Yeah. And that's what I guess my get it. And I want to emphasize something here, and hopefully people saw this in my framework. My framework was not, we live in a free country and dag nabbit, we should have this freedom.
Yeah.
Because that's putting the wrong thing first. I mean, I do agree that, based on the freedom that our country was built on, that I have a problem with mandates on that reason as well. But my priority is Jesus Christ, not the country. And so I'd have a problem. My opinion would be the same even if we lived in a country that didn't have the same freedoms, But I do think, and this is something I think we struggle with, is everybody has to try to love people that disagree with them.
Yeah.
And to me, that means I'm all for encouraging everyone. I encourage people to get the COVID vaccine. I do. I think everybody should do it. And that's loving for people who, regardless what you think about someone's choice not to get it, you should still love them. All right. And if you really think that they're at, that other people are at risk or whatever, anyway, it's a loving thing to do. At the same time, we also need to be loving towards those who, who don't want to get the vaccine. And part of that love means not forcing them to inject something into their body that they don't want to do. And forcing can come in multiple ways. It can come by way of government mandate. It can also come by, like I said, do it or you are unemployed, or you can't put food on your table. And I think either of those, I think, is not the morally correct choice to make. But hey, so I probably made everybody upset with me, I guess, at this point.
I would agree with you. Yeah.
You agree that everybody's upset with me?
No, I'm not upset with you.
So, anyway.
Yeah.
But I do think that is, and I agree with you, I think you said this at the very beginning, that we're going to see an increase in mandates. And I think people and companies, I think they do have the right to mandate, legally speaking, if they, now that we have this full authorization. I think that was a hurdle. It was definitely a legal gray area whether companies could mandate vaccination of their employees while it was still under emergency use authorization. That aspect has definitely changed, I think, right now. And so it's probably coming.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I would add, I agree with what you said. And the only other thing I would add too is also to try to be as informed as you can, understanding that you be selective with your sources, but have those discussions in love.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because that reminded me of something else I wanted to say. We ain't doctors, all right? Understand what we're doing here. Ben and I are giving you our opinions. This, for whatever it's worth. Mm-hmm. This is what we've done. We've looked at the research and we've looked at the topic, and these are the conclusions we've come to. I do not claim to be a medical expert, and I'm assuming he doesn't
Neither
either.
do I. No.
Even though of the two of us, I actually do have a title that ends in doctor. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
Juris Doctor, law degree.
Oh.
Yeah. As a lawyer, that is not my, I told you that's from my fraternity in college. That was,
It's president.
It does say president, no, but that is not a medical doctor. That is a legal doctor. That does not authorize me to prescribe medications or give medical opinions.
Speaking of set pieces, though.
What, you want to talk about our new set pieces?
No, but you're blocking Stay
I'm
Puft.
not blocking Stay Puft. That's because let's just say I'm wide. Stay Puft is still here. Here he is. There you go. See, hi. He's still here with us. He's just been demoted to the background a little bit. There we go. I'm going to block him no matter what, but he's back there because we have a few other set pieces. If anybody else in the live chat can pick out, there are three new set pieces on this set. And if you can identify all three, well, we'll give you credit in the live on the air.
Do you ever have those?
I got no authorization to give a prize.
Can they see all?
I think, I believe, don't look back, Ben. You're going to give them away. Look at the screen up there. And yes, I can see all three on the screen right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you ever have those I Spy books when you were younger?
I did, yeah.
We should do something like that, like I Spy in the background, because Ben and Ken are getting boring.
And if you're watching this after the fact, all right, and nobody guesses it right in the live chat, we will give you a shout out on next week's show if you put the comment on the YouTube page as far as what you think the three new set pieces are that are on the set. All right, we got one more topic tonight. Let's get to it so I can go grocery shopping. So,
Don't forget.
Well, yes, this is our last. No, let's just go ahead and do this, because maybe this isn't what we want to end on. Maybe we should do this now.
Do you want me to read the story?
Is it a whole story? I mean, don't take 5 hours to read it.
I'll try to zoom through it. So we were, gosh, how many weeks ago was it?
14 million.
No, it was probably at the beginning.
1 million weeks ago. Sorry.
Stop. It was probably at the. Stop. Not even.
Speaking of Jeff Bezos, no, sorry.
Good Lord, help me. Okay.
Was it that week that we did?
I don't know. I have no idea. I got no idea.
It was at least at the beginning of August. So there's a little Jewish girl named Alta Fixler. Is that what we decided her name? Pronounced her name. Who's in a hospital. And I don't remember what NHS stands for. Do you guys?
National Health System.
I don't know, but it's in an NHS. She's in an
It's their Department of Health, basically.
They're an NHS hospital in the UK, and her parents, she's on life support, and the European Court of Human Rights, they appealed to the European Court of Human Rights to keep her on life support, and lost. So parents' rights are not the same in the UK as they are here in the US. It said so this article that I just found said that the father of the 2-year-old girl whose life support is due to be withdrawn this week. It was this story was posted on Monday, so sometime this week. This father has appealed to the NHS to allow his daughter to die at home now. And the hospital says that she is in constant pain and continued life support is not in her best interest, yet it's been several weeks since we've talked about this story where they won the appeal to make that choice to take her off life support, and they still haven't done it yet.
True.
Now the parents are against it because they're ultra-Orthodox Jews, is what this story says, and say that withdrawal of life support goes against their deeply held religious beliefs. And they also say that in the Jewish faith, your how did they put it? In the Jewish culture, one becomes a member of the faith at conception. And so Alta, regardless of whether or not she could express her own religious beliefs, it's her religion, forbids the withdrawal of the life-saving care. Now, there's a lot of places in America that would like to, they've granted non-immigrant visas to her and her family, because her father is actually a U.S. citizen, to get her here or to an Israeli hospital. There are Israeli hospitals that are willing to take her and continue her life support, but they've been refused permission.
There's also U.S. ones.
Yeah,
aren't there?
but both have been refused permission to remove Alta from the hospital. They're stating that she's in pain. Now, according to this article, it says the trust, which I guess is NHS, had sought expert opinion on Alta's condition from independent doctors not involved in her care. But the father said that these doctors are still in the NHS system. And so they still work for NHS. He says
no conflict of interest there.
Yeah, he says he has consulted 4 doctors in the U.S. who have concluded that after reviewing her medical files that she could not feel pain. So my biggest thing here is that the NHS says that as soon as they withdraw life support, or the NHS trust has told the family, so the family is the one who is reporting this, because the NHS refuses to comment on her condition to any reporters anymore. The NHS has told the family that life support will be withdrawn this week, and according to Alta's fathers, doctors have said it could take minutes, hours, days, weeks, or even months for the child to die. But it also makes it sound like they're not allowed to take their daughter out of the hospital after they do it.
After she passes?
No, after they take her off life support so that she can...
Until she passes.
Until
she passes.
I wonder...
And they're feeling extremely uncomfortable every time they go into the hospital because all the people that are working at the hospital are going against their wishes for their daughter. Now, it sounds like she's been on care ever since she was born, and that she was born in the UK in February of 2019, and she's been cared for by this hospital since then. So they were... Essentially, it sounds like her parents just happened to be in the UK when the mom went into labor, and that suddenly gives them the right to make these decisions, I guess.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't the other article that what we had reported on, or we had talked about a couple weeks ago, said that so she was born in the UK, so she's a natural citizen there, but doesn't she have dual citizenship in Israel?
Yeah, she's an Israeli citizen, yeah.
I believe that her mother is an Israeli citizen, Although I can't.
One of the articles we talked said that she was considered an Israeli citizen. Now, I don't know what UK citizenship laws are. I mean, we know that if you're born here in the United States, generally speaking, that makes you a United States citizen. I don't know if the UK has the same policy or not, to be
A
honest.
lot of
Yeah,
countries, that's
presumably.
all it takes. Because I have a friend who has dual citizenship in India because his mom happened to be there when she gave birth.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, though, if she is a Israeli citizen, and I'm not versed in international law, but I struggle to see how they can keep them there. Like, say they wanted to, even if they take her off of life support, and there's a chance that she'll be able to make the trip to Israel, where they have said they could provide her free care.
Yeah, but don't remember what the judge said about that. There's too much instability in Israel. He's worried about her well-being. So we're going to kill her in the UK. I don't want to get going down this path too much because it's going to get me wired up.
And I'm
but
sorry, but I just wanted to update. I think it's.
I appreciate the update, and we'll try to do that each week. But
and we should. I just think we should, pray for
Absolutely.
this family and for Alta, because it's distressing to me. I mean, nowhere in the article, I will do my due diligence here. Nowhere in the article has the Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust said they're refusing for them to take the child away. It's the family who's saying it after the life support's been.
Well, they're not. I mean,
removed.
I'm sure they have the equivalent of a HIPAA type violent thing right there too.
Yeah,
they probably
they
can't
do, and so
disclose that.
because they won't make any comments on that.
Right.
So what we're hearing is in regard to that issue has to be, unfortunately, one-sided.
Yeah.
But I'm just hoping he gets his wish, because if she's gonna die, I don't know what Jewish religious beliefs are regarding that, but if they want her to be with them constantly when that happens, so that they are guaranteed to be there when it happens.
Yeah.
I'm just.
I would hope that they would have the hospital have some provision for that.
Well,
but you never know.
They
The
don't
least
want.
they
They
can
don't want it to
provide.
happen in the hospital anymore.
Yeah. So
Because
some
the
kind of home
hospital
hospice care
went-
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
But it's a very different system.
Uh,
All right, we do have, before we move on to our next story, we do have a comment here that popped up on YouTube from Yoko Yukio. That's kind of pertaining to our last story about the vaccinations. And Yoko here says, excuse me, when I point out that Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists cannot have aborted fetal renal cell lines injected into them, cells that are in the vaccines, I get put in timeout. Well, Yoko, excuse me, I'm hoping that we don't get put in timeout by YouTube here. We do. I mean, YouTube has put a little COVID-19 vaccine, link underneath our video. I think Facebook has done the same. They do that with all, it's their platform. It's their right to do that. The one correcting note I will make, Yoko, is the vaccines the vaccine themselves, and this really arose specifically in relation to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
I think we spoke about this.
We did a few months ago, when it first came out, that the vaccine does not contain fetal cell lines or fetal tissue, all right? Or I should say cells taken from a cell line that was taken from aborted fetal tissue, all right? What did happen, though, is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in particular, when they were testing this mRNA, messenger RNA vaccine, they did use cell lines that came from that aborted fetal tissue from the 1970s in their testing of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And you're right, we did a show about this. I'm talking too much. My voice was doing so well today, and then now I talk too much and it's going again. And we did a show about this a long time ago, and I certainly see a lot of Christians' concern with that. Because the idea is, okay, even if the vaccine itself doesn't use it, are you still encouraging abortion, basically, by allowing the byproduct of abortion to continue to be used over and over and over again? And other people talk about, at some point, does it become too far removed from the original? I can't even remember how long we went on, but we had a whole conversation about this.
Well, I think the Vatican even issued a statement on it, saying, basically, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it was one or the other who's saying was preferable to the other. The Vatican statement basically said one of the vaccines was preferable because it was further removed from that aborted.
Or maybe
fetal
they
cell
didn't
line.
use the tissue in their testing of it. I don't know.
Right.
My recollections, I thought Johnson & Johnson was the only one that used that fetal cell line, the aborted fetal cell line in their testing, but I could be wrong about that. But Yoko, I will say that I think you illustrate something that Ben was talking about earlier, and that's about religious exemptions to these types of things. Well, I think there's a difference of opinion within the Christian community as far as whether or not that should be a disqualifying reason to taking the vaccine. I am very sympathetic, obviously, because unabashedly pro-life. I've said it a million times on this show. I'm certainly sympathetic to that, and I think that is a legitimate religious objection to at least the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I think. So, all right, we have one more topic tonight, Ben. What is it?
All right.
I got to give her credit.
Good.
This is the Allison Mayer segment of the program now.
Yes, it is.
A topic that was suggested by Allison Mayer. You don't know who she is? She's science teacher here at the school. We'll call her Superfan. And
it might have been the episode that she was on the show where we talked about that fetal cell.
Oh, the fetal cell one?
Yeah, I think it might have been.
Maybe.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
So
yeah, she was a guest host on the show here a few months back. So, all right, what's our last
But
topic?
so shout out to Allison. It's article she sent us from the Scientific American. It's kind of an opinion piece written by John Horgan. This was the author of this particular article. Basically, the headline says, "What God, quantum mechanics, and consciousness have in common." So basically, this whole article is a plea or an advertisement, basically, for agnosticism. So he starts off talking about how there's such a thing as being too picky, but when it comes to things like work, love, nourishment, even the pickiest eater has to eat something. He says that when it comes to answers to big mysteries, most of us aren't picky enough. So basically, stating the case for extreme scrutiny when it comes to these big picture things, which is kind of the thread that he ties throughout, linking God, quantum mechanics, and consciousness, kind of these big overarching mysteries that science hasn't quite figured out, that there's a lot of debate in the scientific community on. He goes into certain things as far as why he is agnostic, why he prefers agnosticism, and we can jump onto certain things here. I've got
we will.
some of these. One of the things he says, people I admire fault me for being too skeptical. And he says, somebody once asked him, "Do you believe in anything?" He said, "Actually, I believe in lots of things. For example, that war is bad and should be abolished." Pin in that.
Pin in that one. You know where I'm going on that one.
Yep, I figured. Which is why I'll let you have first crack at this. But then he talks about, when it comes to theories about ultimate reality, he sides with Voltaire, where it says, "Doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is an absurd one." So basically advocating for be an extreme skeptic. One of the reasons he gives for agnosticism is the age-old problem of evil. If God is good and he created us, then why is there still evil in the world? Put another pin in that, because that's something we've talked about before on this show, as well as, is frequently brought up by atheists and agnostics alike.
If only someone was going to be teaching a class about that coming up. Wouldn't that be convenient?
So that's kind of two of the main points in the problem of God. Then he goes on to the problem of information, where he leads into quantum mechanics, where it's now in the field of science, and specifically physics, where there's the jury is out on what exactly quantum mechanics is. Should it be interpreted via strict information, or should it be interpreted there's multiple
PIM particles. Quantum mechanics are explained completely by PIM particles.
We should all get our science from Marvel Comics. Because gamma radiation will definitely turn you into a green monster and not just kill you outright.
That was sarcasm. Please, nobody go out and expose yourself to gamma radiation.
No. Even though we are not scientists, we can say enough to say, do not do that. So basically there's the many worlds hypothesis of quantum theory, of quantum mechanics. There's wave theory, string theory, all of these different things. Basically, scientists can't agree on how exactly to approach quantum mechanics and what that means. And then there's also that ties into the problem of consciousness itself. How does matter create consciousness? How does matter interact? And so kind of he's skeptical about certain scientists like Francis Crick and Christoph Koch, who propose that consciousness is created by or generated by networks of neurons oscillating in synchrony. So basically, consciousness is nothing more than the firing of synapses. Well, that's been debunked time and again because that's empirical evidence for neural theories of consciousness failed to materialize, meaning that there's something to consciousness beyond just those electrical impulses. So all of these, tied together, basically, he's creating a case by trying to say that there are certain things where we cannot and maybe perhaps should not know the answers to. We should be more skeptical about things, which leads this particular author to fall into the agnostic camp. So as a Christian, Ken, how should we respond?
With gentleness and respect, 1 Peter 3:15.
There you go.
But we also should always be prepared to give an answer, 1 Peter 3:15. And I found the article fascinating because it was almost like I felt the author wasn't seeing the forest through the trees. He laid out 3 areas, like you mentioned: the existence of God, quantum mechanics, and consciousness. Let me real quickly just, obviously people understand what the existence of God means. Quantum mechanics is, everybody's over, Newtonian physics, where you picture, Newton sitting under the tree and the apple falls on his head. Ooh, discovered gravity. The laws of physics that we all think of only apply to big objects, basically. And then when you get down to Ant-Man level sizes, okay, we're talking the quantum realm, the really, really tiny stuff, those same rules don't apply. And that's what quantum mechanics is all about, is how things function at that very, very, very small level. And the problem of consciousness, now here's how I like to explain it. How does a robot have free will? If you can't. I mean, if you program a computer, you may be able to program it with so many variables that you don't see how it reached a conclusion, but its conclusion is always guaranteed by whatever input you put into it, all right? It's fixed. It's not free to choose one way or another.
Even the most sophisticated self-learning AI still follows its programming.
Exactly. Sarah Causey gives us some praying hands here and a heart on YouTube, or on Facebook, rather. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
So that's the consciousness problem, is we all certainly feel like we actually have free will. Our decisions are not pre-programmed into us. We have the freedom to choose one thing or another. That's because we have this consciousness that is something more than just the mechanical workings of our brain. All right. So those are kind of the 3 issues that he identifies. And what he says for quantum mechanics is he talks about, well, nobody really agrees and knows how it functions. And one thing I will give him credit for, he talks about how, some of the principles of quantum mechanics actually, predict certain things. A lot of people look at quantum mechanics and just say, well, nothing is caused in quantum mechanics. And it's like, no, that's not true. It's hard to predict. You can have something behaving as both a wave and a particle. I'm not going to go into all that science. But it's not true that quantum mechanics things are uncaused in quantum mechanics. Sometimes very difficult to predict, maybe unpredictable. But he actually
the act of observation is the cause.
Right. That's one theory that's out there. But one of the theories is basically information-based. And we're not going to go into all of it, but basically quantum mechanics is explained as collections of information, all right? But what he says, and this is very powerful in saying, here's why I'm an agnostic on quantum mechanics in response to that. He says that the concept... I'm sorry?
Can you explain what agnostic means? Because a lot
Sure.
of people
Okay,
get
so
confused
the 3
with
categories, we'll say theism, atheism, and agnosticism. All right, and agnosticism can be a term that has implication beyond just the existence of God, but this is what is being talked about here. Theos, meaning God. Look, I'm doing the foreign language stuff, okay, not him. All right, so theism means there is a God, all right? And there can be polytheism, poly meaning many, there are many gods, things like that. But theism means there's a God. Atheism, A meaning no, all right, means there is no God, all right? And agnosticism, A meaning Gnostic knowledge, meaning, I don't know, You know, I can't know. So theism, if you're a theist, you say there is a God. If you're an atheist, you say there is no God. If you're agnostic, you say, I don't know if there's a God or not. All right. Or a hard agnostic would actually say it's impossible to know whether there's a God or not. You see that out there sometimes too. So this author is saying the only reasonable conclusion is to throw up your hands and say we can't know, is essentially what he's arguing. And when he's talking about quantum mechanics, and specifically this information model of quantum mechanics, he says the concept of information, and for information, think of this. It's the difference between a monkey sitting down at a typewriter and typing random letters versus typing up all the works of Shakespeare, okay? They're still just letters and ink being put on a piece of paper, but when the words are arranged in a certain way, they convey information. Where they're arranged randomly, they don't. All right. We can all recognize the difference between random letters on a page and a Shakespearean sonnet. You know, and so even though they're all just letters, mechanically they're the same.
But yet he says that information is meaningless without a consciousness to interpret it.
Gee, if only there was an explanation where there was a consciousness from the beginning of time. You know, and that's what he says. He actually says, you know, as far as we know, consciousness arises only in certain organisms that have existed for a brief period here on Earth. No, that's an assumption you're making. All right. Then he says, so how can quantum mechanics, if it's a theory of information rather than matter and energy, apply to the entire cosmos since the Big Bang? Well, if the entire cosmos was created by an intelligent agent, i.e. God, then that solves that problem, doesn't it? You know, same thing with the consciousness issue. You know, so if you theorize God, the God hypothesis, we call it, solves his problems with quantum mechanics.
Yep.
You look at his problem with consciousness, all right, and he basically says, you know, we thought we had it explained. We thought we could come up with a mechanical explanation where robots could have free will, essentially, but all that's fallen apart. Nobody knows what it does. So I guess we can't know. Well, hold on. If we are not just physical beings, but we are also ensouled beings, you know, if there's more to us than just the physical, but we have a physical body and we have an immortal soul, all right, or an immaterial soul, then your consciousness can come from that soul and then act through the mechanics of the physical body, all right? Hey, look at that. Christian faith, the Christian worldview also solves
the problem
your
of consciousness.
consciousness problem. So that gets us back to the first problem, the existence of God.
Gee, do you think Christianity solves that?
Well, obviously it does, but I think to be fair, you know, you need to look at it. So what was his objection to the existence of God?
Problem of evil.
The problem of evil. The problem of evil basically saying there's too much evil in the world. I can't believe that a loving God exists because, and it's the classic alleged dilemma. If God is all loving, then he would want to get rid of evil. If he was all powerful, he'd be able to get rid of all evil. And yet evil exists. Therefore, God either can't be all loving or he can't be all powerful. All right.
To his credit, I will say, he says, if the problem of evil prevents me from believing in a loving God, then the problem of beauty keeps me from believing in an atheist, or keeps me from being an atheist, which is why he sides with agnosticism.
Yeah, there's too many things that just have, you know, are beautiful in this world to think that everything's just mechanical, you know? And that's why I did mean what I said. I really enjoyed reading this article because I thought this was, shall we say, an intellectually honest agnostic, which is a breath of fresh air. Yeah. But where he did himself in, and you picked this up too, all right? He said, when he was asked, don't you believe anything? Actually, I believe lots of things. For example, that war is bad and should be abolished.
Take that pen out.
Really? Why? On what standard? Why? Do you want to sit back and say, why do you think war is bad? What is it that makes war bad? And keep in mind, when someone says that it's bad, they mean objectively bad, not just
morally evil.
Morally evil, not just I don't prefer it. All right? I mean, it's kind of like, you know, Greg Kokel gives the example of insulin versus ice cream. All right. If I make the statement, which I believe is objectively true, but others in this room will disagree with me, that mint chocolate chip is the best flavor of ice cream, which, by the way, honey, we need to add that to our shopping list. I need more.
No.
It's really, when I say mint chocolate chip is the best, what I'm really making is a subjective statement, meaning a statement about my personal preference. I like it the best. Whereas if I say insulin is a medication that's often used to treat many diabetics, you don't really get a vote on that one. I mean, it's true. It's objectively true whether you agree with it or not. Right? And so when you say war is bad, war is evil, what you're saying is kind of an insolent statement. War is evil. Killing babies is evil. It is wrong, whether you personally believe it to be or not.
It's axiomatic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's the problem. If it's true, whether people agree with it or not, then where does that come from? I mean, there has to be some moral standard above and independent of our personal opinions that says war is bad. All right. And if all we have in this world is, time plus matter plus all of us moist robots around here, then there is nothing above us.
Sounds like the name of a band.
The Moist Robots. That is stolen from Cross-Examined. What's his name? I'm drawing Frank Turek.
Oh, yeah.
Frank Turek uses that analogy. But yes, I see, Mary Kay. Thank you. So if naturalism is true and all there is what the physical realities of this world, and there's nothing above the physical, then there's nothing to say that war is bad. The other example I give is, let's say that I walk up on the street one day, Ben's walking down the street, and I bam, punch him in the face. All right. I know. And Ben looks at me and says, I'm going to sue you because I think that was legally wrong. And I say, no, I think I was legally right. And he says, that was legally wrong. I say, no, I think I was legally right. What's he going to do? He's going to take me to court, and the judge is going to open up the law book and see what the law book says. And what that law book is going to say, whether me punching him was actually legally right or actually legally wrong, regardless of what I thought, what I personally believed. All right. There's a standard outside of our personal opinions that dictates that. Take the same example, but now say Ben says he thinks it was morally wrong for me to punch him. And I say, no, it was morally right. He says it was morally wrong. I say it was morally right. The question here is there a standard similar to that law book in the legal example? Is there a moral standard that dictates which one of us is correct in that situation? If you make a statement like this author did, that war is bad, you are saying that there is such a standard, and it says that war is bad. Mm-hmm. Naturalism doesn't offer a standard. Christianity does. It's God and God's character. We can get into all the specifics, but we won't. But the Christian worldview actually shows that in order to even make a statement, that his starting statement, there's too much evil in the world. To even say something is evil in the first place, you first have to assume that God exists to be that standard to define what's good and evil. So even raising the problem of evil in the first place assumes the existence of God. Now, we can certainly ask, and I think it's an important question to ask, why does God allow X evil and Y evil? And that's an important question that we're already running late, so we're not going to go into. You want more information? 6-week class starting on October 28th, Thursday night, that I'll be teaching here at Trinity, and it will be, I believe, live streamed as well, so keep an eye out for that. I think it's going to be called, I've already forgot what I'm calling it. It's,
That's not good.
It's not the problem. It's Understanding Evil, a Christian perspective, I think, or Understanding Evil from a Christian perspective, I think is what I'm calling it. What's that?
You like the word perspective.
I like the word perspective, yeah. So we'll be going into more detail, but the point is that this author, with his objections to quantum mechanics and his objection to consciousness, both fall away if God exists, and his only objection to God existing is inconsistent and actually isn't an objection at all. In fact, by even raising it, he's assuming God exists, which means all of his problems, all of his objections can be solved on the God hypothesis.
Right.
I've talked long enough.
Well, no, I think you covered it beautifully. And so I would just add that, biblically speaking, the Bible speaks to this, that when Gentiles, i.e. unbelievers, act according to their conscience, they are a law unto themselves, even though they do not follow the moral law, the law of the Bible, the law of God. They still follow a moral law that is written on their hearts, because as Romans talks about that, God's invisible qualities have been made known so that people are without excuse. We have this general sense, we call it our conscience, and so when we act against our conscience, the Bible says, you can sin against your conscience. You can have weak consciences and strong consciences. There's this whole idea of conscience that even an unbeliever still has that. And that is evidence, again, of a creator who is and a embodied soul.
An
that speaks to
embodied
them.
moist robot.
That's right.
But your point, I mean, his comment illustrates your point.
Mm.
He can't escape the fact that he feels that war is bad.
Yeah.
Because he's got that instilled in him.
Right.
You know? And so we can't escape that. Sarah Causey here on YouTube does say, because I thanked her for her things earlier, she says, "You're both welcome, Mr. Ken and Pastor Ben. Good words as a robot sounds. Good fun, neat to learn." Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, but we can't escape that. And there's, I can't remember which seminary professor said this. This is not something I'm actually advocating. But they said, if anybody wants to get up and tell you that morality isn't truly objective, meaning morality is just like ice cream. It's what we prefer, but it's not really, there's no really standard above us. Steal their wallet.
That's exactly what one of my professors, Duffy Robbins, he said, if someone tells you there's no such thing as right or wrong, steal their iPhone.
Yeah, you know, because when we're the victim, obviously we do think there is a standard that you know people should be obeying. Even the most hardened agnostic or atheist who tries to deny that, when they're on the receiving end of it, they betray their own convictions.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so we got a little philosophical there, but I do say, and I do want to give Mr. Horgan a lot of credit, because it was, like I said, it was an intellectually honest piece. I felt I appreciate a lot of what he said. I think, like we pointed out, a lot of what he said in here, he was able to acknowledge a lot of the points that, let's face it, a lot of people who label themselves as atheists or agnostics are not able to, such as the beauty in the world and things like that. I just think that he needs to think a little harder about it, because he's being, and I'm hopeful that maybe he will, because he's obviously a pretty good thinker here. He's just being inconsistent with his own opinion when he objects to the existence of a loving God on the basis of the problem of evil. Actually, you're assuming the existence of loving God. And once you get past that hurdle, Mr. Horgan, I think what you'll see is all your other objections, they're met. They fade away. Yeah. They're there. So it's amazing how Christianity, it's a line of reasoning called, inference to the best explanation. If we have a data set, we have all these things we're seeking to explain, and a lot of the proofs for the resurrection work the same way. All these things that we're looking to explain, and we look at all the different hypotheses for them, and we say, okay, this hypothesis might explain this one, but not these two. This one might explain these two, but not this other one. And what you're looking for is a hypothesis that can explain all the things that you know to be true, all the things that you observe, all of your observations. And this is one of those examples where if you really think it through, the God hypothesis, specifically the Christianity hypothesis, explains all of these data points, Mr. Horgan. Explains them all. And so does that prove to 100% certainty the Christian God exists? No, that's what faith is all about. Right. But God has given us enough to have trust, to take that step of faith, to have trust in him based upon what's been revealed. So,
well said.
That it?
I think that's it.
7:01. We didn't really make it out early, but we're earlier than we have been, so we're going to get out of here. We still have to go grocery shopping, so I'm not going to belabor this sign off, other than to say thank you very much to everybody who was watching. We have no winners to our contest of name the 3 new set pieces behind us. So if you are watching this after the fact, maybe you have an advantage because you can pause it and maybe zoom in, whatever. But there are 3 new set pieces on the shelves behind us, and anybody who can properly identify all 3 will win nothing other than we will, at the beginning of the next show, we will announce to the world that you are the king or queen of observational skills. So that's all I got. All right. Anything else, Mary Kay? Anything else, Ben?
Nope.
All right. Anything else, all you people out there?
Wait 30 seconds.
We're done. Okay. Thank you all very much. We're here every Wednesday night at 5:30. Again, I haven't checked, but please subscribe to the YouTube channel. At the beginning of the show, we were again at 1,199 subscribers. I know if you look at it, YouTube says it's 1.2K. They round up. All right. I'm OCD, and I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight if we're at 1,199. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And while you're at it, share the video, like the video, tell your friends about it. And we got a lot of things here on the channel, hopefully, that can benefit you. All right? Good.
All right. Sounds good.
Good night, sir.
Good night, sir. Thank you.
Good night, my lovely wife back there. And what?
Good night.
Well, good night for the show purposes. Did you ever show people? Did you ever turn on your producer cam?
No.
Turn it on. Give them one. Say hi. Say good night to people at least.
No.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, people.
And we will see you next week. All right. God bless.